We are here to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, a game that I have mercilessly ridiculed for quite a few decades now. Ooh. You may have a guess as to what this game is, a game that I don't think should exist. Here's the thing. I've spoken very badly of this game for many years now. I'm curious what you think we're about to talk about.
My only guess is maybe Croc, Legend of the Gobbos.
Oh, yes, it is Croc, Legend of the Gobbos.
This is all tying together now. Here we go.
In some of my creative work, I have made fun of Croc.
Yeah, if I was on the Croc development team, I'd kill myself.
Okay, well, hold on.
Said some mean things about it. I don't hate Croc, but it just seemed like such an easy game to make fun of because, well, let's just get into it. So broadly, Croc is a mascot platformer game for the PlayStation 1, released in 1997. What's your experience with this game?
Oh gosh, I was so young. I remember one of the big deals about it for me at the time was like when I saw it at the age that I did, it was a greatest hits title for PlayStation.
Oh, interesting.
So that's always kind of a brand of like, it's less about the critical consensus and more about sales ultimately. Yeah. So it's like, oh, this is a greatest hits. Like, oh, it's got that special green label. So it's like, oh, it must be like pretty decent. And
this is the greatest game.
Yeah, like the greatest hits. Yeah. So, I was probably like 8 years old or something. And I like really loved Crash and Spyro. So
sure,
I'm like, I got to pick up another fun little platformer. So, I scooped up Croc and I just remember the controls feeling a little jank, and I vaguely remembering I think I got stuck at a boss that's like in a boxing ring, or there's like, or maybe that's one of the first bosses, and then there was like, and that's when I remember, but there was like a later part I got stuck at, but like I don't remember beating it, and there's a point of me to understand who I was as a kid. I dropped games all the time. I was really bad with it, and it was a very habitual thing, unfortunately. And Croc was one of them for my early years, because I do not remember beating it.
Funny you should say that. I was playing through Croc for this video, just do some research.
Beauty.
And I got stuck on a few puzzles.
Okay.
And I knew that I didn't want to watch a YouTube video that was like, hey, guys. There, I scared you.
It's like, hey, guys.
I'm so sorry.
That's the beauty of this podcast, of that spontaneous cinema, man. I wasn't expecting that. Scared the shit out of me.
I'm just traumatized. I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize. That was fun.
Anyway, so YouTube videos are very loud, as am I sometimes. Yeah, I looked up like a text walkthrough, and I forgot. It's like hard to picture a 3D space through text. I know this is like such an obvious thing to say, but like when you're reading a puzzle solution for Croc, and it's just someone saying, go to the blocks. I'm like, I don't know where you're talking about, or go forward. And I'm like, where is forward, right?
Yeah.
So to your point, not an easy game to look up guides for. Also, I would say kind of a blandly designed game, not to give away the premise of this video too much, but the level design's a little sus. It's not like Mario 64 where you're like, go to the big snowman. You're like, oh, I know where that is. All of which to say, so originally when I was sort of putting this video together and planning it, I wanted it, knowing what I know about Argonaut Software who made it, I was thinking of making the thesis of this video that this is a company that does a lot of great tech stuff and like is partially responsible for the era of 3D games that emerged in the 90s. So I was like, here's going to be a video about why I hate Croc, but think that the tech behind it is impressive. And here's the thing. Through my research, I found out it's actually the opposite. So by the time Croc came out, that tech was pretty dated. So Croc is not really a technical achievement on PlayStation. The Windows version a little bit, but the PS1 version of Croc, instantly outdated. The gameplay, I actually don't hate as much now. Okay. So I've softened on the gameplay of Croc. It's pretty fun, but we'll get into why. I will say, I guess we'll start with the gameplay. The first boss of Croc is like the dumbest boss fight in any. It's like the worst boss fight I've ever seen.
Wow.
Let me bring up some footage because I was kind of baffled. Like I thought I just wasn't understanding what was happening, or like I thought there must be some like hidden feature that I don't get. There must be some extra button on the controller. No, it's just like a profoundly dumb boss fight, and I was like really overthinking it. So the boss fight is called Lair of the Feeble. So you already know like this is not going to be a big challenge. Oh yeah, so plot wise, there's like the green duck gets like transformed into like a humanoid guy with a star on his belly button, and then the evil goblin's like, oh, go, and that's it. That's like the setup.
Incredible.
Okay, so as soon as you walk in, The green guy just starts running at you. And I'm like, what is happening? What is this game? All you do, it turns out, is you run until he gets tired and then you attack him.
Wow.
I thought you had to run in circles. I thought you had to jump and hit him at a certain... No, he just like runs and then stops. And you run faster than him, so there's no actual like gamification. It's just like... I don't know. I know this is like sort of a kid's game, and this is the first, but like there's a limit. Like this is a profoundly dumb boss fight.
Like it's like the devs and the very idea of the boss is that he's just like so bored in himself. He's like, I guess I gotta friggin' chase this guy, and just gives up. Even in like other kid friendly like platformers and. These bosses have like telegraphed attacks and animations like, oh, I've way overswung and now I'm all vulnerable, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, this is like, it's so lethargic and just like everything about it is like not menacing. It seems like an ally. He's just some goofy dude. Like, there's no threat here. It's not palpable.
He's like barely taller than Croc too. Like it's really, there's nothing scary about it. He runs goofily. Like, again, I know this is a kid's game, but like you can aim a little bit higher. Yeah. Right? Like, like I think of some of the puzzles in like Freddy Fish are actually quite complex. My adult brain, sometimes I'm like, oh, who wears the cowboy hat? Like, but this is just like, this is overdoing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the boss fights in this game, not my favorite. The level design, subjectively, I think is kind of oversimplified. But since I've said a bunch of mean things about this game, I would like to jump back. Argonaut Software, who made this game, so they're a pretty important presence in like home computer 3D rendering in terms of gameplay. They made this game called Starglider, and this is like the late 80s. No, this is 1986. So this is like the Macintosh has only been out for a couple years. A little bit on the primitive side of things. There's these wireframe 3D graphics, and so all the shapes are just... They're untextured, they're unshaded, it's just lines. Yeah. So this looks like about what you'd expect from a 3D game from the mid-80s. The second game, which comes out only a couple years later, it looks like a colossal leap forward in terms of the tech. So Starglider 2, and again, this is running on standard computers, home computers in 1988. As you'll see, it's sort of that Star Fox look, right? It's these triangles, unshaded triangles, but still like those are polygons, right? And they somehow got this to render on computers that did not really have GPUs in the way we understand them today. It's just like, I don't know. I know it's like a kind of slow, boring looking game, but this is very impressive tech, right?
For its time, absolutely. I'm sure.
All of which to say, so I don't know if you've heard of Argonaut before, but they go on to actually be commissioned by Nintendo to make Star Fox, which actually looks an awful lot like this.
Okay.
And the cool thing with Star Fox, I guess for people who don't know, is that the game cartridge had a GPU inside it.
Wow.
Which is an astonishing feat. And that's partially why cartridges were so much more expensive relative to CDs, is that you could put hardware in them. So there's some quote by the developer. I don't know the exact quote. Maybe I'll put it on screen. But it's like the Super Nintendo wasn't really doing any processing with Star Fox. It's like the whole, like the cartridge is doing everything. Like the cartridge is doing the computing and the processing. Insane. Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next part of the story, I had to like really like do some background hunting to make sure this was true, because a lot of people say this online.
Okay.
There's a lot of rumors floating around, and I checked some good sources, and it is actually true that after Star Fox and Star Fox 2, which did not initially get released, Argonaut pitched a 3D Mario World to Nintendo, and they're like, look, you can play as Yoshi and like run around, and here's a mock-up of a 3D Yoshi game. The CEO of Argonaut was actually the first non-Nintendo employee to play Super Mario World. Yeah. And so he just loved that game. And so he's like, what about a 3D version of that? And so he pitched this tech demo that was like a 3D Yoshi game where you're running around as Yoshi. And as the story goes, and as is apparently true, that game was turned down by Nintendo, and they took basically the same game and rebranded it as Croc.
Wow.
Hence why Croc is sort of greenish and running around. So that's what happened there. Also, this took me down a rabbit hole. The Nintendo PlayStation, if you're familiar with that.
Nintendo PlayStation.
Let me look up the picture. It's the best picture.
Oh, good Lord.
Nintendo had teamed up with Sony to do a prototype of a Super Nintendo that had a CD drive. Wow. And this is what it looked like. And the PlayStation logo is the PlayStation logo.
Yeah, it is.
So there's a lot happening here. So there's like a Super Nintendo cartridge slot, and then like a Super Famicom, and then a CD drive. So what happens here is Nintendo pulls out of this deal at the last minute. Sony's pretty upset, and they make the PlayStation. Yeah. The other thing that came out of this is Nintendo gave up on Sony and went with Philips instead. And the fallout of that deal is why we have the CDI Nintendo games. Was like Nintendo's apology to Philips for canceling the contract was you get to make Hotel Mario, which so Nintendo's early flirtations with CD drives like could only bring heartache because the PlayStation nearly killed Nintendo several times. All of which to say the video card in the Nintendo PlayStation, if it was released, was actually going to be a Super FX chip, which is what Argonaut made for Star Fox. So in this hypothetical other world where the PlayStation is not its own console, but is in fact a part of Nintendo, there's also this Argonaut Software would have made, the Croc people would have made the video card for the PlayStation. Anyway, that's
crazy.
That's a lot of information that's nothing to do with Croc. But what's interesting is that in the, I think, early 90s, there's some venture capitalists who come into Argonaut Software and say, you've got this incredible graphics division that kind of has nothing to do with the creative. It's like you have two different companies, essentially. And so they get split up into two companies, and one of which becomes all about graphics chips, and the other one becomes all about software. That's sort of where Croc comes in. Okay, so the thing with Croc, I will say, it's not the most interestingly designed game, but it is designed by someone, like a group who clearly understands how 3D graphics are rendered. Because especially these crystals, this is just a very low poly sphere. In Blender, we call these icospheres, but it's a very easy to render shape. And not only are they like allowing that in the game, but they've embraced it. Like, this is a unique shape. We're going to incorporate that into the lore of this world. And also, at least the first Croc, this changes for the sequel to its detriment, but the draw distances in Croc are not super noticeable because the environments are all pretty small. So there's these walls everywhere. And I think like other arguably better games of the era, like Mario 64 or Spyro, they have these like obvious draw distances. Like you see the fog coming at you. But in this game, it's like they just knew that going in. So they're like, let's make the environment small so you're not going to notice. I think that's pretty cool. It's a game designed with the console's limitations in mind, which I think is really cool. Croc 2 looks scary because I believe they did not do that for the sequel. And the draw distance is just like this black wall. Okay, so maybe it's not black, but like there's obvious fog, right? And I understand the goal of like making the levels bigger. But it kind of dates the game, right? It makes it feel, Superman 64, first Silent Hill. And obviously the first Silent Hill's doing it with creative intention, but all of which to say, I think the first game uses its resources better than the sequel.
Yeah. I mean, from how you describe it, it seems like, the devs for Argonaut, there was a lot of developer kind of intuition about software they're running and what kind of technical things they were actually capable of. It's, it seemed like they had a good grasp of what they were doing, but I guess, things just did not pan out in several ways.
Yeah. Well, it's also funny you say that because last episode we talked about DirectX and how it's a bunch of different APIs. So Microsoft was hoping to buy a 3D game rendering engine. So I guess a 3D game engine in the 90s that would be part of DirectX. And so they approached Argonaut. They're like, can we buy, it's called B-Render, I think. So it's the Croc engine, essentially. They're like, can we buy the Croc engine to include in Windows? I don't know what happened, but Argonaut was just, it didn't work out. And there's some quote, I forget what it was, I'll put it on screen, but someone at Microsoft was like, if you don't sell this to us, we are going to kill you. Like, we're going to destroy your company.
Wow.
And there were only 3 major 3D game engines at the time because it's the 90s, right? One of them was, of course, Renderware, which most people have heard of. The other was B-Render. And then, let me pull up the other thing. B-Render, Render Morphix, and Renderware.
Morphix, okay.
So Microsoft ended up buying Render Morphix instead, and that's what's inside DirectX. It's called Direct 3D.
Okay.
Renderware did pretty well. B-Render, Argonaut Software filed for bankruptcy, and they were completely dissolved as of 2007. So Microsoft was actually right. The company with billions of dollars won, as they always do.
Very sad.
So that's what happened to Croc and his little engine. So that's a little sad history. So really what happens is like what Argonaut is doing in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s is very technically impressive. By the time it comes to Croc, I mean, this is the same year. This is actually a little bit after Quake comes out. This is around the era of things like Tomb Raider, and it's just really not that impressive of a game when you compare it to especially Mario 64, which had already been out for a year. Like, this does not look better than Mario 64. No. And it's really a hard sell. You mentioned the controls. This game has tank controls, which are for a platformer.
Platformer.
Which is a party. I will say, in medium defense of tank controls, there was a Windows 95 port of Croc, the first one, and it ran on anything. Like they basically, because they're this graphics company, they actually released, I don't know the exact timeline on this, but the original PC version of Croc for Windows does not require DirectX, probably because a lot of Windows PCs did not have it yet. So they basically made their own rendering engine from the ground up just for Windows, and it's very efficient. And I had this I don't know if you remember, I had this Toshiba Windows 95 laptop.
Oh, okay.
With I looked up the specs, way under the system requirements for the first Croc. I think it has half the RAM you need to run Croc.
Wow.
And it was fluid 3D gameplay, ran really well at what I perceived at the time to be a high frame rate.
Wow.
And obviously tank controls on a laptop aren't the worst thing in the world because you only have 4 arrows. Yeah. So I will say the Windows 95 port of Croc was very impressive for the time. It ran on anything, even if you didn't have a video card. I had a Pentium 1 laptop edition card. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you have a Windows 95 PC without enough RAM, Croc is the game.
Croc is going to be, the new ubiquitous Skyrim. You can play it on anything. I'm going to be playing Croc on my fridge. That's the move now. Forget Skyrim. It's passe.
Yeah.
And bringing Croc back.
As we should.
Yeah.
Which of course brings me to the conclusion, which is that there is an HD remake of Croc coming out coming down the pipeline. I would like to draw attention to something kind of cool, which is that up to the announcement of the official Croc remake, which we haven't heard anything about since. July of this year, they announced it. So it is real and it involves the actual game designers. There was a fan project that this YouTuber made, if we'll endure another ad for Royal Dutch Airlines.
Fittingly, their username is Croc is back. They are diehard Croc fans. I appreciate that.
Someone on YouTube someone in real life who has a YouTube channel was making their own HD remake of Croc. And this looks shockingly finished in the sense that I know this isn't a level, it's just a test environment, but they got the run animations. I think it's running in Unreal Engine. Seems like it's running okay. At one point they go over to this bouncy thing and it actually functions. So this is an awful lot of work. And I, from my perspective, knowing what I know about Unreal, it wouldn't take that long to take all these assets, which seem to be functional, and just make levels out of them.
Yeah.
But either way, once the actual Croc HD remake was announced, this person was all right, we're going to cancel this. We're not going to. So this didn't go anywhere, sadly. It looks very high effort. But
I was going to say, Croc's little animations with his eyes and kind of the gradients of the shadows and how he reacts to everything. And even the Gobbos guy in the corners, he has his own animations where he's just looking around. That's way too elaborate for a collectathon. Just those little details. It's crazy.
It's very high effort. And there's something kind of dated about Croc as a premise, which it's possible that its nostalgia cycle is ready to come back, but it was kind of this era of if you made a video game, you had to have a mascot, which I don't think we have anymore. It's not I know there's action figures, but I don't have my plushie of the main guy from Last of Us. I don't have it's not Call of Duty, Call of Duty, the stuffed animal. So it's this era, you got Tomb Raider, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Mario, and obviously Sonic. It kind of dates the game in a way there's just something about a mascot, and especially for a game that the first couple of games sold pretty well, obviously greatest hits, but it didn't become this blockbuster success. There's something extra sad about a mascot that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Because it's not only did you make a game, but you really tried to have a Saturday morning cartoon. Yeah. It's one of the most dated. I think the funniest thing, as I'm sure you've seen, is all those articles where it's is Blinks the Time Sweeper gonna kill Mario?
Classic, yeah. There's
just something Voodoo Vince, all these wannabe mascots, and I would lump Croc in with that. It's because Croc is essentially, as we know, a fake Yoshi. It's really trying quite hard to have a mascot, and I don't know if it panned out.
Yeah.
So I guess my conclusion is the inverse of what I had originally set out to make this video about. So my real conclusion is that Argonaut was a big player in the early 3D rendering scene for early PC games and home consoles. Obviously Star Fox is a tremendous achievement if we know anything about how limited the Super Nintendo is. It's full triangle polygons on a very limited console. Croc really is not a big achievement in 3D. It's certainly an achievement in developers being realistic about what they're up against, in resource management. Everything about that game, it was designed to run well, and it does. But oh boy, the controls and the level design and the fact that it has tank controls a year after Mario 64, it's a hard sell. So my real conclusion is that the tech really isn't all that impressive. The game isn't super well designed, but I had fun playing it this time. Okay. I got like the sweaty palms action play, which hasn't happened to me, fun fact, since I played Wario Land Shake It on the Wii. And before that hadn't happened since I played Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage at Dan's house. So
that's quite a saga.
A few name drops for you. But I got some of the jumps you have to make in Croc are very precise and the controls are not your friend. So I found that very fun. A lot of, we don't get a lot of opportunities anymore to like replay a level over and over because it's like unfair.
Yeah.
So.
But Hidetaka Miyazaki loves to put in some platforming segments in the Souls games.
There we go.
Games that should not be designed to be platforms, but we just have to suffer through it anyway.
Yeah, the best jumping controls is run and then untap a circle and then tap it again.
God.
The best running controls. So conclusion, I had fun with the gameplay of Croc this time. Did not find the graphics all that charming. So it's really less of a technical achievement, but coming from a company that is impressive in that regard. So anyway, I still hate Croc. It's the theme of this video.
Whoa. Let me chime in here and say, I feel like having heard a lot of this story now and getting so much background detail, I feel like it's such a sad underdog like the game and Argonaut, like they're just trying to survive and make their lame little Mario knockoff, and then Microsoft's like, fuck you, die. And it's just like everything goes to shit. So now I think Croc is giving me some pathos with this, but fair. But also it's a goofy game, but to trail off on another little tangent, I think in a way we should bring back the mascot games. I think because maybe I'm just out of touch as like a someone who grew up with the mascot games and everything, but I feel like it's just so weird the games kids are playing these days that don't have that kind of centralized identity and ubiquity and also just the lack of platformers these days too, because those were always like fun kid-oriented games that were like happy and uplifting, and now like kids are playing Fortnite with like all these other licensed games and IPs and individuals, and it there's novelty to that kind of amalgamation and everything, but.
Well, I appreciate you coming to Argonaut's defense. There are a lot of things to feel bad for Argonaut about. Microsoft crushed them deliberately after warning them we're going to kill you.
Yes.
Also, Nintendo kind of screwed them over by not releasing Star Fox 2 for like 20 years. Yeah. That's unfortunate. That's mean. To your point, though, I think the mascot platformer, I'm not a huge fan of the mascot in platforming, but I think you make an interesting point, which is that, like, let's say the kids today are playing Roblox and Fortnite. Here's the story. I felt like buying some Nerf guns the other day because I'm an adult with no money.
We have money now. We can do the kid things.
Yeah, I'm an emotionally maladjusted adult. I can buy Nerf guns. All the Fortnite merchandise in, like, let's say Toys R Us, it's already not in the game by the time you go to Toys R Us.
God, yeah.
So it's like, because the things, obviously Fortnite is cyclical, right?
Yeah.
Also, there's my partner's nephew is obsessed with Roblox. Like, plays it like 6 hours a day of Roblox. Someone got him like a Roblox action figure for his birthday or whatever.
Wow.
And the person who bought it was like, so who is that? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Because there's no core branding. Yeah. There's no visual branding in Roblox, right? Or at least it's inconsistent, and then all the content is user generated. So anyway, I hate Roblox for a variety of reasons. But it is interesting, to your point, that some of these games that kids are playing now, they're so like user generated and stochastic that you can't have action figures. I guess our Croc video ends with me shitting on both Croc and Roblox, which I think is
that's a Croc blocks.
There, Croc blocks, the crossover that we deserve.
So that would be a sight.
Anyway, so that's Croc. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Computer Lab Hijinks. Thanks for watching. All right, we got it.